Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile. With the price of just about everything going up during inflation, we thought we'd bring our prices down. So to help us, we brought in a reverse auctioneer, which is apparently a thing.
Mint Mobile Unlimited Premium Wireless. How to get 30, 30, bit to get 30, bit to get 20, 20, 20, bit to get 20, 20, bit to get 15, 15, 15, 15, just $15 a month? Sold!
Give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
$45 upfront payment equivalent to $15 per month. New customers on first 3-month plan only. Taxes and fees extra. Speed slower above 40 gigabytes. See detail.
What up, y'all? It's Joe Budden, here to talk about Prize Picks. Prize Picks is the best place to win real money while watching football. You can get up to 100 times your money.
Prize Picks will give you $50 instantly when you play your first $5 lineup. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. Just download the Prize Picks app and use code SPOTIFY. That's code SPOTIFY on Prize Picks to get $50 instantly when you play a $5 lineup. Prize Picks. Run your game. Must be present in certain states. Visit prizepicks.com for restrictions and details.
When I wake up, well, I know I'm gonna be the man who wakes up next to you. When I go out, yeah, I know I'm gonna be the man who goes along with you. If I get drunk, well, I know I'm gonna
Oklahoma at Missouri on Saturday evening in a game that the Sooners have to win. When you look at the final 3 games of the season, the Sooners are at Missouri, home against Alabama, and then on the road at LSU or after Thanksgiving. Oklahoma's sitting at 5-4 on the season. The Sooners have to pick up one more game to be bowl eligible. There isn't a better opportunity on the schedule than what they've got going on this Saturday evening in Columbia. What's up, everybody? I'm Matt. This is Caleb with us as well. You're listening to the Sooner Nation podcast. Caleb, this is a top 25 matchup. The Tigers are 2-2 in conference play, but they're 6-2 overall on the season, and they're ranked number 24. Oklahoma 0-3 against top 25 opponents this season.
Yeah, and we're going to have to play the best game that we've played all season to be able to walk in and pull off a win, which is kind of the direction we've kind of seen these past 2 weeks. I know we do drop that game against Ole Miss, but it was a loss where we talked about it afterwards. It kind of gave you hope. You know, you had a lot of creativity on the offense. You kind of started seeing that identity in the power run. And then we go to Maine, and I get it's Maine, but you just do exactly what this Oklahoma team should do against Maine, and that's something we have not seen this season. So going on the road to Missouri, who might be without their starting quarterback, hasn't really looked the greatest this season, the recipes for success is there. You just have to execute.
Yeah, you mentioned the quarterback situation for the Tigers, and that is that's the story right now. If you're Missouri going into this game, Brady Cook, his status for the upcoming game is questionable. Eli Drinkowitz expressed confidence in that he's going to be prepared for the game on Tuesday when he met with the press. He said, I know y'all are going to ask me about injuries. I'll welcome all the questions you want to ask, but we'll defer to the injury availability report that will be released tomorrow night. So this was on Tuesday. He said that Wednesday night, last night, was when the report was released, and there's Cook on it as questionable. If he's not able to play, the backup quarterback for Missouri is Drew Pine, and that's a guy, we've talked about how big of an impact that turnovers have on the game this season. In limited opportunities, Pine is the guy who's turned the ball over a lot. And then, Drinkowitz even talked about that. He said, we've put Pine in some bad situations, and we've got to protect better. We've got to establish the run better, and we can't run the ball over and over and over. We talk about the receiving core for Oklahoma, but we'll get into that here in a second. But this is a game changer if it's Drew Pine over Brady Cook, not making it like an automatic win for Oklahoma if Brady Cook can't go. But the Sooners are a 2-point favorite right now on the road in Missouri. And you got to think the reason why is because of the status of Brady Cook.
Yeah, were you kind of shocked to see that that line has kind of moved to give OU that kind of edge over Missouri right now.
I think I think that's how much I think that's how much of a value that Brady Cook is to this Tiger offense. I mean, he he is the kind of the main cog in the wheel, so to speak. They've got Theo Weiss, they've got Luther Burden, they've got the skill position guys. But as Oklahoma fans, we know this from the last 20 years. Even when you've got one quarterback who competes on a certain level, and then the guy behind him is several steps behind, then the offense doesn't click. And I think that's what Vegas is going on the information that they have. The injury is on his throwing hand. And so if he can't go, which it looks like, again, if you're just looking into the odds, the fact that the Tigers 6-2 are an underdog to a 5-4 team, it has to tell you he can't go. And it has to tell you that's the value that he brings to this team.
Yeah, I think we opened up, was it 2.5 point underdogs? Now that line's now to OU, the 3 point favorites. I didn't think I would see another game outside of Maine where OU was favored,
Mm-hmm.
but here we are. And this is the time, the momentum's kind of starting to be built back on this Sooner team side. If you take what Jackson Arnold said, we're gonna get some receivers back this week, but it's gonna be a week where even if Brady Cook plays, it's gonna be a tough game. Even without Brady Cook, it's still gonna be a tough
Right.
game.
Right.
This is how to be where the defense steps up. The defense can't have those sloppy first drives we've seen this past 2 weeks. The offense can't have those fast three and outs. And I think this is a game where the Sooners can absolutely steal it.
I mean, if you're a 3 point favorite, are you stealing it?
Yes, even if
Okay.
you're 3 point favorite. If you're a 5-4 Oklahoma team who has struggled to move the ball, even I get that you're a 3 point favorite, it's still stealing a game. It's still going on the road and
If
stealing it.
if Cook cannot go, then we talked about Drew Pine. Behind Drew Pine, you've got a preferred walk-on transfer, J.R. Blood, which is a cool name. And then you got a freshman at Aiden Glover. Um, man, it's just it's a bad situation for Missouri. And if you're Oklahoma, I mean, here's the way I look at it, Caleb. You never want someone to be injured. I don't care how hated the rival is. I don't think you ever cheer for injury. But man, after what the Sooners have gone through at the receiver position, at the offensive line position, at the running back position with Gavin Salchuk, you kind of get happy to catch a break, don't you?
Yeah, absolutely. And we kind of caught a break against Ole Miss with their top receiver being out. And obviously, when you have a quarterback like Jackson Dart, just because he has his top target out doesn't mean that that's going to slow him down that much. But having your starting quarterback and Brady Cook, it's not like he is a fantastic quarterback, but
Mm-hmm.
he's still a really good quarterback. He led them to was it a 11-2 season last year with was it the Rose Bowl? I know they beat Ohio State in a big bowl game. Can't remember what bowl game it was. But Brady Cook is not a terrible quarterback. He's not a quarterback that kind of hinges on borderline winning and losing games for you. He's won a lot of games in his career in Missouri.
Mm-hmm.
So losing him is a big knock for this team. So yeah, catching a break when you've been without your top five receivers, you've been without your running backs throughout some point of your time, it kind of feels good. Not gonna
Well,
lie. Again, you don't want to rush for like I would much rather him go in and beat Missouri with a healthy Brady
right,
Cook,
right.
and especially I believe this is his senior season. I don't know how lasting this injury is gonna be. The last thing you want is a kid to go out in the senior season and miss his last 4
Mhm.
games. But I wouldn't mind if he sat this one out.
So for the injury report on the Oklahoma side, the usual cast of characters, Jaden Gibson, Nick Anderson, Angel Anthony, they're all out, as well as Ginger Williams and Kendall Dolby. On the offensive line, you've got Gary Hatchett, Jacob Sexton, and Jake Taylor that are all out. But questionable is where you start to raise your eyebrows, both in a good and in a bad way, because Jalil Farouk is questionable this week. Deion Burks, questionable. Gavin Salchuk is questionable. PJ Adbari is questionable. Josh Bates, Michael Tarkin, they're questionable. And then Javante Barnes. I mean, that's just one of Javante Barnes. You look at that and you think, oh, Jalil Farouk may play this week. Oh, Deion Burks may play this week. And if you're a connect the dots kind of guy, you look at what was said about receivers coming back. And you think, Jackson said there's 2 guys coming back on our offense this week. And you look immediately that Jalil Farouk and Deion Burks are the 2 receivers that are questionable. And you think, oh, well, they're coming back. But then you see, wait, why is Javante Barnes questionable? Right?
Yeah.
Because it's 2 different sets of emotions. You're excited about the possibility of these 2 receivers, but then you're kind of like, well, why? Why is he there? What happened to him?
Yeah, and I don't know why he's on there. I don't know if you found something. Um, I'm trying to search. I can't really see anything about Barnes being hurt or what that really is. So I'm hoping that because if he can't go Saturday, that's a huge loss for the Sooners.
It's bigger than Cook from Missouri because we're going to get into this here in a few minutes, but the offensive game plan for Oklahoma has to be heavily slated towards the run game, and he's your best back. And if he's not able to go, and then you already know Gavin Sawchuk's banged up, that leaves you Taylor Tatum as your workhorse. And not that Taylor Tatum is not capable, it's just that he's a freshman and he's turnover prone.
And another big one I want to point out is Tarquin. With Taylor and Sexton being ruled out, you really can't afford to lose a third starting member of this line.
No, that's true. That's a great point.
He's a big one to kind of circle and watch to see when I know we get another injury report later tonight, and then we get one tomorrow night as well. Kind of see what does he kind of go to, and I also really like to seeing Downs as probable. I know he kind of went through warm-ups last week, and it's kind of a thing. I feel like the coach staff's like, we don't really need you tonight,
right?
So let's kind of just keep you back and keep you healthy. Now I do know for Tarquin that he was in a boot last Saturday. I saw a lot of people freaking out. Just because you're in a boot doesn't mean it's necessarily serious. They put people in boots sometimes just so they can still be with the team, but not have the weight on the foot. So it could be like a ankle sprain, high ankle sprain, something like that. Not necessarily something that is serious and he would miss a lot of time for, obviously, because he's questionable, not doubtful or out. So I am kind of hopeful that he will play, and we do need him. Because if not, this already kind of terrible offensive line has to go to their backups. Now, I know we liked what we saw out of Eddie Perry-Louis last week, but is he capable of doing that against a SEC defensive line? Is he capable of doing that against a real-time opponent and not just an FCS school? That's the big question mark for me.
We got more to talk about with Oklahoma and Missouri. We also have talked about a little bit of basketball. The Sooners opening up the season with a 93-60 win over Lindenwood. True or false is coming up. I'm asking the questions of Caleb. This is the Sooner Nation podcast.
So, you want to be a marketer. It's easy. You just have to score a ton of leads and figure out a way to turn them all into customers. Plus, manage a dozen channels, write a million blogs, and launch 100 campaigns all at once. When that's done, simply make your socials go viral and bring in record profits. No sweat. Okay, fine. it's a lot of sweat. But with HubSpot's AI-powered marketing tools, launching benchmark-breaking campaigns is easier than ever. Get started at HubSpot.com/marketers.
Caleb, let's step away from football for just a minute and talk just briefly about basketball. Oklahoma opens the season with a 93 shellacking of Lindenwood. Oklahoma looked athletic, and that's you look at what Porter Mosier's trying to build. He has a team that could shoot well, crash the boards, but man, they looked athletic, and it's one of the things I want to watch as the season goes on. Northwestern State is their next opponent on Monday night, so it's kind of like Oklahoma football playing Maine. You're beating the teams you're supposed to beat. You're dominating the way you're supposed to dominate, but man, they just looked a little bit different in terms of physicality and athleticism than what I remembered them from last season.
Yes and no. If you go back to the last season, at the beginning of the season, they looked athletic, they looked big, and they looked to be able to do what they were lacking in the seasons prior and getting those rebounds and being physical in the paint. But when it came time for conference play, that kind of all disappeared. That's one thing I just really want to keep my eye out as we go through this rest of this non-conference schedule is because we do have some big non-conference names. You have Georgia Tech December 3rd, you have Oklahoma State December 14th, and then you have Michigan December 18th. Those are all three teams that have been pretty good in basketball. They're going to be more physical than people like Central Arkansas and Northwest Missouri State or Western State, whatever it is. It's going to be those are going to be the games we kind of see, okay, this is what this team's going to be made of. Now, they did look very good Monday night. Again, they should have against Lindenwood. But even without, I don't know his name. I do know we had one starter that did not play Monday night. And he's supposed to be kind of the big scorer for this team. They still moved the ball pretty well, and they still put up 93 points.
Yeah, Jalen Moore, 23 points on the night. Freshman Jeremiah Fears, 16 points. Sam Godwin. I feel like when you play an opponent and you're like, man, that guy. I feel like he's been in college for 10 years. You get that feeling whenever you see somebody else. I feel like that way about Sam Godwin. I don't know if I've ever felt that way about an Oklahoma athlete, but I feel like Sam Godwin has been on this basketball team this is like his 17th season.
Yeah, I saw a highlight. He had a big poster dunk.
Yeah, he ended up with a double. I got sidetracked thinking about how long he's played, but he did have a double-double. But go ahead. Yeah, had the big poster dunk.
And I was like, that guy looks a lot like Sam Godwin. And I checked the box score. I was like, oh, he's still on campus somehow. The only other player I can think that made me feel that way, I have two. I feel like Landry Jones was in Norman for a decade.
Okay.
And then Ahmad Thomas. I just feel like and Ahmad Thomas more of a bad presence. I feel like he was just on campus for way too long. I'm like, how is he still out there blowing coverages 7 years later? But those are the only couple guys that I can think of that, like, yeah, how is he still in college?
Well, those are your three big names from Oklahoma's win over Lindenwood. Jalen Moore, 23 points. Jeremiah Fears, 16. Godwin with the double-double. Hey, Jeremiah Fears, heck of a debut for the freshman. Now, he came in with a lot of publicity, surrounding him. I mean, I know it's only one game, and I know it's only Lindenwood, but he did not disappoint.
Not at all. And, and I get that it's Lindenwood, but I feel like what a lot of people are missing is this kid should be playing his senior season of high school basketball. And instead, he's out there dropping 16 points in his first career college game. He looked good. He looked long. He looked athletic. He Played the He was tied for the second most amount of minutes in this game coming off the bench. I'm kind of excited to see what all he can do as this season grows. I do not expect him coming off the bench for long. I feel like he's the type of kid that, unless Porter just absolutely wants him playing those kind of twos rotations where he can just dominate, I expect him to kind of be slotted in that starting five. Maybe not this next game, but the next game after, just because he's talented and he's still learning the game of college basketball, but he's talented, and I liked what I saw from him.
Yeah, you made an interesting point about him coming off the bench or being in the starting rotation. One thing that has really going back to Lon Kruger, recently something that's just kind of been an Achilles for this Oklahoma basketball team has been points off the bench, and the Sooners had 29 points off the bench. To me, that's a one of the biggest takeaways from this game was 29 bench points, and Jeremiah Fears had a lot to do with that. 29 points off of fast breaks, and then 8-second chance points, 14 points off of turnovers. So when you're looking at pattern and pace of play, you've got everything there to make the right formula for a successful season, which is going to take us right into true or false. So you ready to segue into that?
Yeah.
True or false is the segment of our podcast where we throw out a statement, and one of us says whether it's true or whether it's false. And so here we go. True or false? Porter Moser has to make the NCAA tournament this year.
True. Um, I mean, he's been there since he really got on campus. He's had a great non-conference. Once conference starts, that's kind of when the Sooners fizzle out. I know there's big debates. Really the past 2 years if the Sooners should have made the tournament. They were kind of right there on that bubble of first four out. But has to be the year that he makes it. It's year 4,
Yeah,
correct?
right.
So it's time for I get that Oklahoma's not a basketball school, but you can't just settle for 4 straight years of not making the tournament. And I get he's had a lot of roster turnover in all 4 years, but that's kind of on him. It's not on anybody else. He has to make this tournament this year.
I agree wholeheartedly. And again, you've got various reasons, roster turnover and so forth, injuries. But this is it, man. I feel like for Mosier, it's make or break in year number 4. All right, so let's go. The rest of the is going to have to deal with Oklahoma and Missouri. Sooners going to Columbia for the first time since 2011. It's a rivalry with the Tigers that predates the Big 12 all the way back to the Big 8. True or false? Oklahoma, Missouri was an underappreciated rivalry back in the day.
I'm going to show my age here a little bit. And I'm going to say true, but at the same time, I feel like I really can't give a great opinion because of how young I was when Missouri left the Big 12. Now, I remember the smacking in the Big 12 championship game with Chase Daniels. I remember that game vividly. But outside of that, there's not too many other Missouri games I really remember.
So, go ahead.
Just because of, again, I was, like 11 when they left the Big 12?
Yeah, you're exactly right. It's 2011 was the last time these two teams played.
So I feel like I was a little bit too young to kind of remember that, but I get that it was still kind of especially with those, Chase Daniels was the name, right? The quarterback?
Right. Booger.
Especially with those couple of games, those games kind of got intense, got a little more heated. So yeah, I can say it was probably a little bit more of a slept on rivalry. for the Sooners.
Oklahoma won that 2011 game by a final score of 38-28. The Sooners won 8 of the last 9 meetings against the Tigers and 20 of the last 22 meetings against Missouri. I would say false, just because I feel like it was not quite to the extent of Oklahoma State, but it was we want to be a rival. We want to, but to be a rival, you have to, there's got to be give and take. I mean, why does Oklahoma and Texas hate each other so much? Because that's a rivalry where one team will win 1 or 2 years in a row, the other team will go on a 3-year streak, the other team then 1-1, and it just keeps going back and forth. And when you have such lopsided records like you did with Missouri, like you did with Oklahoma State, to me, I have a hard time calling that a rivalry. True or false? Well, let me set this up. Oklahoma is facing a familiar foe on Saturday with Missouri wide receiver Theo Weiss, who decided to transfer out of the program this season. Thies, I just made a new name for him. This season, Weiss is averaging a career low on yards per reception at 13 yards per catch. True or false? Weiss will have a big day against his former team on Saturday.
I'm going to say false, just because even if Brady Cook does play, his injury is on his throwing wrist. That's going to affect how much he can do through the air. Theo Weiss is not the number one target. So, yeah, the attention's not going to be on Theo Weiss, but with the way that they like to play Luther Burden, he's not always in the same spot. So there's going to be plays where, he's covered by each play, he's going to be covered by somebody else. And so, I say something who really favors that matchup is kind of him against Woody Washington. That's really the big mismatch I see for Theo, is he's a little more bigger of a receiver. We know that Woody has struggled with big receivers, into where, a typical number one receiver is going to be lined up in the same spot. Theo's going to be all over the field. Luther Burns going to be all over the field. So you're going to have Billy Bowen matched up on Theo. You're going to have Eli Bowen matched up on Theo. It's going to be different players in the secondary. So I mean, can he average more than 13 yards a reception? Yeah, but I don't think he's going to have a 100-yard game with a couple touchdowns.
Okay. Jackson Arnold, since being reinserted as Oklahoma's starting quarterback in that South Carolina game, that was 3 weeks ago. He's completed 55 of 88 passes for 63% completion percentage, 631 yards, 5 touchdowns, and here's the big one, no interceptions. True or false, Jackson Arnold is poised to have the best game he's ever had against an SEC opponent on Saturday?
I'm gonna say true. The way that this Oklahoma offense has kind of been clicking, his only really other games involved Tennessee. Not that hard to beat his performance against Tennessee. He had a really good first half against Ole Miss. Ole Miss defense stepped up and kind of shut us down in the second half. Missouri has a good defense, but it's definitely I would say it was a toss-up between Missouri and Auburn for the worst defense we played in the SEC. No shots to any one of those defenses. They're really good defenses. It's just the caliber of defenses Oklahoma's played so far in the SEC has been that good.
Mm-hmm.
So I just feel like if Oklahoma can put up, I can't remember, he had close to 200 yards against Ole Miss, correct?
Yeah. I can pull that up for you real fast.
I know he had 2 touchdowns. So yeah, I feel like he can easily replicate that and kind of do a little bit more against this Missouri team who's not as good defensively, especially up front. So he's going to have a little more time to throw the ball when he should. He had 182 yards for 2 touchdowns, 22 for 31. So
You beat me.
I definitely think Jackson Arnold should and could have the best game against an SEC opponent he's had yet.
And I mean, maybe you mentioned it, and I didn't hear it when you were when I was looking up information, but maybe I mean having Deion Burks and having Jalil Farouk if he's back, huge, right? I mean that's a game changer, should be, in what they're able to do in the passing game.
Yeah, absolutely. And I did not bring those two guys up, just because I feel like I'm not gonna count on those guys until I see them on the field.
Right.
But yeah, just unlocking Farouk and Dion Burks gives you a whole nother realm of possibility because you know what Dion Burks is. You know he was his number one target coming into the season. You could tell on the first game of the season when Dion Burks had, what was it, 3 touchdowns in his Sooner
Right.
debut?
Right. But let me interrupt you, because here's what I don't know, and that's what I'm curious to find out. Was Dion the number one going into the season, or did he immediately become number one once Jalil Farouk got hurt? I mean, he got hurt so early in that game, but remember Jackson Arnold connected on a bomb to Jalil Farouk early in that game, and then he's out, and then you go to Dion Burks, the workhorse. So I'm really curious to know what the chemistry is like between Jackson Arnold and Jalil Farouk, and how that relates to Dion Burks.
I'm not trying to take a shot at Farouk. Farouk, I've been high on him. I absolutely loved, he was the only one of those hot dog squad guys that stayed around when Lincoln left. He's been a OU player. He could have left so many times. He could have quit on this team. He has not. So Farouk is a fan favorite and should be fan favorite, but he's not a number one receiver. He's more of a let Dion Burks get the attention, and then in the second quarter, third quarter, then I'm going to shine. Once you start shading back over on me, then Dion Burks is going to kind of pop off.
Mm-hmm.
I don't see Farouk. Farouk has been talented. He's a talented receiver, and we've used him in multiple different ways, jet sweeps. We've lined him up as a running back, and that just shows you how talented he is. But he's not going to be a guy that's a number one receiver. And we saw that last year with Drake Stoops.
Right.
Joe Farouk is definitely the better athlete of those two. But the way that Joe Farouk plays receiver is not a number one receiver. He's more of a, I'm going to do the long, dirty routes that we open every other time, to where these other guys are going to be open more often. But once you start covering them, that's when I shine. And I think that's exactly what we're going to see Saturday if those two can play, especially with Jacob Jordan. I think that kid can have a fantastic game if those two are back, because the attention's not going to be on a walk-on freshman.
Mm-hmm.
The attention is going to be on Dion Burks, who I think he was up for what's the receiver award?
The Blitnikoff.
Blintikoff last season. It's going to be on Jalil Farouk, who has been a workhorse for the Sooners. And so I think that Farouk is definitely not the number one target. I know this is a long rant for a true and false question, but I definitely think that Farouk and Dion Burks, if they come back, that even allows Jackson Arnold to be even more comfortable with what they can do.
Okay. So let's hit the last one. And then this is pretty easy, pretty simple statement. True or false? Oklahoma has to eclipse 200 rushing yards on Saturday in order to beat Missouri.
I I'm gonna say false. I don't think they necessarily have to hit that 200 mark to beat Missouri. They have to get close to it. They're gonna have to run the ball efficient, but what they're gonna have to do is control the pace of the game.
Mm-hmm.
And you do that by, yes, running the ball. But I feel like Oklahoma can get away with a close victory with like 170 rushing yards
Okay.
if Jackson, because again, what we've seen from Jackson Arnold is he's not afraid to check down. And one of the things we've seen from Barnes is he's just been great in open space against Ole Miss and Maine. And the easy way to get him in open space is to check down, have him out of the flats, and just get him the ball. Same
Mhm.
thing, if we have Farouk and Dion Burks back, I expect a lot of tunnel screens, a lot of jet sweeps, jet motions. Um, I remember, I think it was last year, maybe the year before, that there was just one game where they just had Drake Stoops just running like 20 yards before the snap of the ball.
Mhm.
And I expect to see that if those two guys are back because you can afford to do that. You can afford to have a guy like Jacob Jordan running all around the backfield, Jalil Farouk running all over the backfield. If you have a guy like Dion Burks for Jalil Farouk able to run routes.
Yeah.
And so I expect them to do small, kind of like what Houston did against Oklahoma at the beginning of the season, small completions that chew up yards and chew up the clock. And you can do that with guys like Dion Burks and Jalil Farouk because we know the speed they have.
Mhm.
We know, and especially with Brennan Thompson, who they been able to play shallow on us because they know we don't have a deep threat. You got to look at the tape. You see that JJ Hester 90-yard touchdown. That's going to be in the back of Missouri's mind. Because that's one thing we talked about Theo Weiss. How big of a how big is this game for JJ Hester?
Right.
You
Yeah,
know
it's
that
a very underrated thought there. That's good.
because JJ Hester and Theo Weiss they transferred at the same time. It was kind of like a trade, and so far Missouri has won that trade. So JJ Hester wants to. People asking how big of a game is this for Caden Green and Theo Weiss? Not a lot of people asking how big of a game is this for JJ Hester,
Right.
and he's kind of being like, "Hey guys, you saw what I can do last week with that 90-yard touchdown. I want to do this against my old team to prove that they they lost me and that hurt them." So I feel like we don't necessarily have to have 200 yards rushing. I definitely think we have to have over 150 yards rushing,
Okay.
but 200, I would say false.
Okay. Well, we've got the path to beating Missouri coming up in this final segment. This is the Sooner Nation podcast. Thanks for hanging out with us. Sooners versus Tigers Saturday night, 6:45 from Columbia, Missouri. The game's on the SEC network. Let's break this down. Caleb, it's an election week in the United States, and so you hear the phrase "path to victory" a lot in terms of elections, but there is a path to victory for Oklahoma at Missouri. This is a game that obviously the Sooners being a 3-point favorite. It's not a game that's unwinnable. I believe it's a pretty clear path for what Oklahoma has to do against the Tigers, and I think offensively it starts with running the football, does it not?
Yeah, and I'm gonna kind of build on that to include those quick passes, extending the run game. How can you make a run game without a run game? Now, obviously, the power run has kind of become that identity of Oklahoma past couple weeks. Going into this game already down to starting offensive linemen, how do you ensure that you can have a run game, do those quick passes? If we have Jalil Farouk, if we have Deion Burks, get the ball to them in their hands quick, do some jet sweeps, do some jet motions. Just be creative on how you view running the football because it doesn't have to be just handing the ball off. I love the option. I love the triple option we saw where it was Arnold and Barnes doing the typical option, and then you gave the option to Arnold to throw it. Stuff like that to keep Missouri on their feet to where they can't just stack the box and win. That's how teams have beat Oklahoma all season, is they stacked the box and they made you one-dimensional. Don't allow them to do that. How do you don't allow them to do that? Extend your running game. Make it to where if they put 8 guys in the box. Okay, well, we got our speedster drill Farouk back. We're just going to throw a tunnel screen and he's going to go off for 20 yards. Stuff like that make your run game more than just handing the ball off.
Tigers are 6-2 on the season, but they have struggled to contain the run. And the loss to Texas A&M, they gave up 236 yards on the ground. And the loss to Alabama, where they just got blanked on their last time out on the field, is 271 yards to the Tide on the ground. Regardless of how they do it, short passing with those high efficient throws, or throwing it, handing off to Javonte Barnes right up the gut. That has to be the centerpiece. If I'm Joe John Finley, that's exactly where I'm starting my offensive game plan. But then the other thing is they've got to protect the football. I mean, this is just an insane stat to me. 4 losses this season. They've been outscored 41-0 on turnovers. They've got to limit it. Whether it's Drew Pine or Brady Cook, you can't give Missouri momentum, and you certainly can't give them a short field. You got to limit the turnovers.
And I mean, kind of doubling down on turnovers this is definitely a game where I see the Oklahoma defense able to get a couple turnovers. And when that happens, don't give the ball right back.
Right back. Like the next play, right back. Don't if you're going to give it back, keep it for at least 3.5 plays, right?
Yeah, at least extend it. Give that defense more than 30 seconds to rest.
Right.
I mean, we're looking at, I would say right now, I would say Drew Pine is most likely going to be the quarterback Saturday night. 3 interceptions against Alabama.
Yeah.
Now, I know this is crazy to say, but Oklahoma has a quite a bit better defense than Alabama.
I would say up front, particularly up front, Oklahoma is better than Alabama. I don't know, I'd say quite a bit different, but they're better. I'm following what you're saying. I don't know if I can go quite a bit. Let's take that out. Let's say that Oklahoma is better defensively than Alabama.
Oklahoma is a better defense, whatever you want to say. The opportunity for turnovers should be there.
Mm-hmm.
And in those cases if we are able to get our hands on the ball on the defense, the offense has to make up for that. The offense cannot, I mean, even if it's just 3 points, we have to take points.
Yeah.
And,
for sure. Yeah. You don't leave anything on the field points wise, for sure.
And you have to just take advantage of these momentum swings because they're going to be there.
Yeah, I agree with you. The other thing I have for offense is that you mentioned this when I said run the ball. They've got to be efficient in passing the football. I threw that stat out earlier in the podcast. Jackson Arnold's completed 55 of 88 passes for 63 yards, 63% completion since he's been reinserted at the South Carolina game. 631 yards and 5 touchdowns is where he is since that game. They've got to remain efficient in how they get the ball out of his hand. But if they do have Burks back, if they do have Jalil Fruit back, you have to add in those deep shots. You have to take, I mean, last week, the JJ Hester play, incredible play. We talked about it. I believe it was a better throw than it was a catch, but still JJ Hester did what no one has ever done in that stadium before. He took a pass 90 yards to the house. So you don't want to take it away from him, but that's a play that Jackson Arnold made happen because he was mobile. He moved out of the pocket to his right, and then he found JJ Hester. That was a long developing play. I think you have to see a little bit more of that, right?
Yeah, and that's just going to come down to giving Arnold time.
Mm-hmm.
We saw that not just on that play, but also when Jackson Arnold finds Jacob Jordan underneath. That was a play that took a minute to develop. It developed because of everybody crashing down because of the respect they had for Barnes. So you're going to have to be able to establish the run so those type of plays can open up.
Mm-hmm.
But the offensive line is going to have to give Arnold time.
What am I missing anything on offense? Is there anything you want to add to it?
I don't think so. I mean, we got to protect the ball, be efficient, and take advantage of big key moments. I think that's kind of what Oklahoma has to do, something they had not done in big games this season.
I think when you look at the defensive side of the ball, Oklahoma has established themselves with a quote recipe for success. When you look at the losses this season, I don't know that you can pin any one loss on the defense. I think you look at Tennessee, they were inept offensively. You look at Texas, the defense dominated the Texas offense for that first quarter, and then Oklahoma just never got anything going. You look at Ole Miss, you look at South Carolina, and those are just, the offense disappeared in the second half against Ole Miss. The offense gave South Carolina 21 points in the second quarter. The defense has a recipe for success that's pretty simple. They follow it, and if they do it, they're effective, and they give this team the opportunity to be in a position to win if they get support from the offense. And that starts by winning on first down. Oklahoma has to put pressure on Missouri's offense, particularly if it's Drew Pine. If it's Drew Pine at quarterback, you want them behind the chains. You just want them behind the chains. You want your quarterback looking at second, third, and long type situations. And the reason why is because Oklahoma's top 10 nationally in several defensive categories, including yards allowed per running attempt, 2.7. That's how you win first down. Tackles for loss per game, that they're averaging 8, and sacks per game, they're 9th in the country at 3.2 sacks per game. You win on first down and you put yourself into what is your strength. If you're the offense, you lose on first down, you're facing the teeth of this defense on second and third and long. And that's exactly where you want them to be if you're the Oklahoma defense.
Absolutely. And I kind of want to build on that, but winning on first down doesn't matter if when we get in those third and longs, we give it up. And that's something we've seen these past 2 weeks. Even against Maine, Maine had a couple of third and longs that they completed. Ole Miss, that second half, they completed a lot of third and longs. Now, again, Ole Miss is a lot better team than Missouri. Can I say a lot better this time?
Yeah.
You're going to give that to me?
Yeah, I got you on that one.
But Missouri, even with the Drew Pines, they still are going to be able to make plays. But making sure that those third and longs, if it's third and 13, we give up 10 yards, that's okay. I can live with that. But giving up those 15, 16, 17-yard plays on third and 13, that's kind of what kind of killed us in that Ole Miss game. That's what's got us beat on that first drive against Maine when Maine went down and scored is third and longs. We just didn't cover the middle of the field.
Mm-hmm.
Winning on first down, but you also have to win on third downs.
That's great. I mean, you're right, because if you win first down, second down, and you give up, the farm on third down, then you've not only have you given life to the opponent, but you kind of the momentum. A lot of people don't realize the momentum swing of emotion and energy that players go through. You talked about the turnovers, right? So you get a turnover and you're just on this euphoric high because you've just taken the ball away from the opponent. And just as you get to the sideline, before you can finish your swig of Gatorade, the offense gives it right back. And you go from this euphoria sensation to right back out on the field, and you don't really have time to adjust. And there's this emotional imbalance going on in your head. That's why a lot of times there's a really big offensive play after a moment like that, because the defense hasn't been able to balance out. And you see a similar part of that on third downs. I mean, you look at the statistics. If you've got a team in third and long and they convert the majority of the time. They have also a positive play on that following first down. Why? Because as a defender, emotionally, you are in a good place, and then bam, you've lost, and you have to reset that emotional focus. And that it's a people don't realize, when you're watching the game, you don't realize what players go through mentally as they're on the field. And that's why those third downs are typically followed by a successful first down. And just for the record, a successful play is described as 4 yards or plus on average. So that's a great point, Caleb, because you can't win first and second down and then lose third and long, because that's also probably going to cost you first down on the next play, right?
Yeah. And that's one thing we have seen. I will give props to this defense is even when they give those third and longs, they have done really good at bouncing back and winning those first and second downs again. And that's just one thing. This defense is going to have to, and they've done a great job so far this season, kind of riding the woes of the season.
Mm-hmm.
They have been the most consistent side of the ball, and you kind of saw that, beginning of the main game, offense punts right away. Defense kind of like, okay, here we go again. They give up the touchdown. Offense comes back, 74-yard run by Barnes, and he punches it in. And the defense is like, okay, we got this.
Right.
This defense is going to have to keep their heads up even when OU punts. Because when we punt, we're going to need the ball back. And how do we get the ball back fastest? Getting the ball back from the defense. Don't let them score. Forcing those punts, forcing those turnovers, and really just winning first through fourth down. I know
So just win every play, right?
yeah, I know that's kind of well, duh, but just being the dominant defense is this we know this team could be.
All right, I'm going to stick with my initial note of winning first down, and then I'm going to put in parentheses as well as second, third, and fourth. Beyond that, they got to generate pressure. They've got to they've got to disrupt. Again, whether it's Cook or Pine, you want to be disruptive. You want to tackle the running back in the backfield. You want to flush the quarterback. You want him looking over his shoulder as he's trying to go through his progressions. You have to be disruptive, and because when you're able to sack the quarterback, when you're able to register tackles for loss, not only do you mess up the rhythm of the offense, but it opens the door for them to make mistakes. You're forcing those fumbles, you're forcing those bad throws because you've been so disruptive. And I'm not saying this is something that Oklahoma has to do. This is what Oklahoma does. And they have to continue this at Missouri, because something that has kind of dropped off recently is the turnovers. I was shocked that they only got one turnover against Maine last week. Now, they did turn that into points, which is good, but the reality is they've got to get back to being that disruptive force that interferes with the flow of the offense, that gives them the opportunity to force those turnovers.
Yeah, and that starts with the upfront guys. You know, Missouri doesn't have, again, I'm not trying to take shots at this Missouri offensive line. They're still a good offensive line, but they're not one of the best offensive lines we've faced.
Yeah.
Tennessee, Texas, South Carolina, Ole Miss. Again, the only offensive line that can yeah, it wasn't as good. It was probably Auburn's. This is a game where those guys up front, that if it's a four-man or three-man front, they can go out there and they can feast.
Yeah.
I'm looking at, Jaden Jackson. I know him and Caden Green kind of had some chippiness and chirps on Twitter this offseason. This is a game where Jaden Jackson can kind of show up, hey, it didn't take me 3 or 4 games to get my starting role as a true freshman. I started game one. Dominic Williams kind of has had for me personally, He's kind of had more of a underwhelming season.
Mm-hmm.
He's been good, but for the kind of the attention he got out of the portal, I kind of expected a little bit more than for him. And this is a game where he can step up and kind of flex, like I'm still here. This is what you guys were excited about, and these ends as well. These, especially if it's Payne. Payne's not that much of a mobile quarterback, so you can pin your ears back and go after it and get him. And so yeah, bringing pressure is going to be key.
Yeah, and the last thing for me is just continuation of what I was saying is forcing those turnovers. I talked just a little bit ago about how it's affected the offense in those losses, but in the 5 wins, Oklahoma has outscored its opponents 63-6 off of turnovers, and so it's feast or famine for the Sooners when it comes to the turnover department. They've just got to get them. Now, you're on the road, SEC opponent, evening game. You got to win. I mean, and to win, you've got to force the turnovers. And I think back to that Auburn game. How did they get that win? It was Kip Lewis with the turnover. That's how they won that game. Offense kept them close, and that was before they even found any sort of rhythm. But it was what Kip Lewis did that turned the tide of that game. That's how big turnovers can be on the road. Oklahoma's got to win the turnover battle on Saturday.
Yeah, and there's going to be opportunities to pick off either one of these quarterbacks. There's going to be, one thing that I feel is kind of not talked about as much is the ability to punch out balls. That's what this defense does a lot is, those running backs, they don't keep it high and tight. We saw that last week
Last
with
week, yeah.
was Jennings punching it out. We saw that a couple times in the Tennessee game. We saw that a lot against Temple. They can force fumbles, and it's and they force fumbles in a couple of games that they have not returned. They have not recovered it. Going back to the Auburn when they sacked what's their quarterback's name?
The
I'm
Auburn
blanking on
quarterback?
yeah. It was some I can't remember his name, but they sacked him. He fumbles it, and then he recovers the fumble for a first down.
Oh, yeah. Okay, I'm with you now.
Go into the Texas game. We force a fumble, and then Texas jumps on it for a touchdown in the end zone. If the ball's on the ground, you have to go and get it.
Peyton Thorne, by the way,
Payne Thorne,
that's
yes.
the name you're looking
Thank
for.
you. So
That's what I'm here for.
when these opportunities come up, we got to take full advantage of them.
Well, give me let's go back to the offense for just a minute. Give me your guy. Who is one or two players that they're going to be the key to success?
You know,
I think Javante Barnes is a given here, but I mean, maybe not. You tell me.
I agree. I was going to stay away from Trevante Barnes for two reasons. One, because again, I do think he's a given, and two, I kind of thought that you would take him. But for me, it's Jackson Arnold. We talk about the run game.
Uh-huh.
We know how big of a part of the run game he has been this season. Going back to the Ole Miss game, he would have had over 100 yards of rushing if he didn't get sacked 10
Right.
times.
Right.
We saw him run the football a lot against Maine. So he's going to be a part of this run game. But his ability to keep his head, to keep his mind free and not overthink, not turn the ball over is going to be a big key factor in this game as well. So that's why he's my player to watch. It's just how does he respond to being hit in the backfield? How does he respond when pressure does fall in his lap? And if he does turn the ball over once, how does he respond to that?
I'm going to go with these receivers, the new guys that are the old guys that are supposed to be back. I think Deion Burks and Jalil Farouk, we've used we've used their absence as an excuse for one of the reasons why the offense isn't clicking. I mean, there's so many reasons out there, right? There was Seth Luttrell's terrible at play calling. The offensive line is terrible at pass blocking, run blocking, breathing, whatever. The offensive line can't do it. Quarterbacks are inexperienced, and then you've had the whole situation with the top 5 receivers on the roster being injured. They're supposed to be back. If they're back, do they change the dynamic of this offense? And for that reason, that I'm picking those two guys to say, I'm watching them, I'm going to make them a focal point, and I want to see, has that been a legitimate excuse for us this season, or was it just something we threw out there because no one really knew what the problem was with this offense? I do think Javonte Barnes is a given. They've got to run the ball, and you could even throw Taylor Tatum in there. The running back position is going to be critical to this game. I disagree with what you said on true or false. I think they have to eclipse 200 yards to win this game. And so I think the running backs are critical here. But give me those receivers as the guys I'm watching for. On the defensive side of the ball, I'm going to go first. Because you went first on offense. And to me, I think it's more difficult to pick a defensive player because you really don't know what the dynamic of the Missouri offense is going to be at the quarterback position. Brady Cook only has 1 interception all season long. Drew Pine had 3 interceptions just last week. How does that affect the run game? How does it affect you mentioned earlier, Theo Weiss? How does that affect his performance and Luther Burden? So this defense is going to be all over the place because Missouri does have athletic receivers, but do they have a quarterback who's capable of getting the ball to them? Can you pin your ears back and just come at him? Do you play gap assignment football and stop the running game and force these quarterbacks and potentially an injured Cook or a inept Pine to beat you? It's harder on the defense because you don't know what you're getting from the Missouri offense. But one thing that is common, that is solid, regardless of what Missouri does offensively, is you've got to make plays in the backfield. You've got to get negative plays. You've got to, pressure the quarterback, make tackles for loss. I'm going with Grayson Halton. He has a high motor. We don't talk about him enough. I was high on him early in the season. We kind of lost him with the rise of R. Mason Thomas, Dominic Williams doing what he does. You mentioned Jackson, the freshman, but Grayson Halton, he's that blue collar guy that just continually does what he does, which is get in the backfield and be disruptive. And I'm going to pick him as my guy to watch on Saturday.
That's a really good pick. This is kind of the perfect game for a guy like Grayson Holton, just because his ability to be, he's a defensive tackle, but he has that motor, he has that rush ability like an edge. So if he has a great first step and he's fast. So if he gets by you, he's going to be in the backfield and be disruptive. For me, I'm going with Ethan Downs. This is a game that I feel like Ethan Downs can I feel like he always has that one game a season where I'd be like, oh yeah, Ethan Downs he's that dude. And he hasn't had that game where he's like, yeah, he's that dude this season. And I feel like this is a perfect game for him to show out and remind people of why we love Ethan Downs.
Right.
And he's a great run stopper off the edge, and I think they're going to try to run the ball a lot. And his ability to get to the quarterback is really slept on because we don't really see him as the pass rusher because of guys like PJ and R. Mason Thomas. But I just feel like for some reason, I feel like this is going to be a really big game for Ethan.
Well, we've got to do our score predictions for the game, but let's go down with the SEC rundown first. There's some really good games this weekend within the conference. Of course, Mississippi State at Tennessee is not one of them. Florida at Texas probably is going to be a blowout for the Longhorns, but Georgia, Ole Miss. That's the Bulldogs at 5-1 in conference. Ole Miss 3-2. The Rebels trying to stay alive. They get Georgia in Oxford. Georgia right now a 2.5-point favorite. How do you see this swinging?
I mean, this Georgia team is just difficult to read. It just kind of depends on how Carson Beck plays. Carson Beck is he's just not a good quarterback. And I know
definitely wasn't last week.
And the thing is, he's had multiple games like that this season where he He has multiple interceptions. I mean, you go to the win over Texas, a 30-15 win, 0 touchdowns, 3 interceptions.
Uh-huh.
You go to the Alabama game where they had a great kind of second half comeback, but 3 touchdowns, 3 interceptions. You go to Florida, um, you know, 2 touchdowns, 3 interceptions. So he is turnover prone, but they still have playmakers on the offensive side, and they have a really good defense. So it's kind of hard to kind of like, yeah, Georgia has this in the bag, or be like, yeah, Ole Miss has this in the bag, because you just don't know what form of Georgia you're gonna get. Are they gonna get the Georgia team that allows a team to go up 28-0 in the first quarter and they're fighting from the
Right.
back the whole time? Or are they gonna get the Texas version of Georgia where, yeah, Carson Beck's throwing 3 interceptions, but we're still good enough to win this game by double digits. Georgia was never not in control of that game. Now you look at Florida, that Florida game, and it was close. Georgia scores kind of, it was a 7 point game, and then Georgia kind of scores, make it at 14, which I had them on our locks at 14 and a half, and that kind of, but that's a story for another day. But I definitely think that Ole Miss can take control of this game and win it. They have a good enough defense to kind of mimic what Kentucky did to kind of slow this down, this offense. And you just gotta kind of like we talked about this OU offense. When it's not if, it's when Georgia turns the ball over,
Hmm.
can you take advantage of that?
A game that's going to rival Oklahoma and prime time. This game's on ABC. Alabama at LSU. Basically, an elimination game from the conference championship race for either of these schools. I just get the feeling Bama a 2.5 point favorite right now in Baton Rouge. I kind of feel like, I mean, pun intended, I feel like the tide is going to roll on Saturday night.
See, I'm the opposite. LSU has looked really good this season.
Uh-huh.
So has Alabama, but it's been the Alabama defense that's the big question mark. And this is going to be in a hostile environment. This Alabama offense is really good, but is this defense good enough to slow down this LSU offense who has, I mean, they're averaging close to 30 points a game. Their lowest score conference game is Texas A&M at 23. I mean, I, again, LSU is one of those teams I just don't know what to think of because they have a loss to USC who has not been good. Then they turn around and they beat Ole Miss. They lose to Texas A&M, and now here they are against Alabama. But I just feel like this is a game where the coaching experience in the SEC play is going to kind of come out.
Okay. But see, I don't have a lot of confidence in Brian Kelly as coaching experience. A hat tip to the game that precedes Oklahoma on the SEC network, South Carolina at Vanderbilt. Vandy, a 4.5 point underdog at home. The fear here is that after achieving bowl eligibility last week, that the Commodores kind of have a hangover, so to speak, this week. I don't know if you saw this or not, but something fun. If you don't watch SEC shorts, you need to. Just it's fun. It's like a 5 minute, 3 to 5 minute video that they put out every week that makes fun of the previous Saturday's college football games. But you know what I'm talking about, right, Caleb?
Yeah.
The guy who plays Vanderbilt on the SEC shorts, you know what I'm talking about?
Mm-hmm.
Vanderbilt is actually bringing him as that character to the game to be on the sidelines Saturday for this.
That's amazing.
Yeah, I love that. So,
Yes. Again, this is two teams that make no sense. You have South Carolina, who has looked really good this season. You know, they blow out Kentucky, turn around, they lose by 3 to LSU, turn around, get blown out by Ole Miss, 2-point loss against Alabama. We all know what they did in Norman, and then they just blow out Texas A&M.
Right.
So they're kind of riding hot, and then Vandy, who a lot of people picked to be dead last in the SEC, should have beat Missouri, should have beat Alabama, beat Kentucky. They did beat Alabama, I'm sorry.
Yeah. They should have beat Texas. They had
Texas,
that
yeah,
comeback to Texas. Yeah.
they should have beat Texas. And then they kind of dropped. I know that they beat Auburn, but that was a really ugly game. So yeah, I don't really know who to pick in this game. It's definitely a game that I will have thrown on my TV because I think it's going to be a ugly, funny game to watch. Because I think these are kind of like, when this practice is getting to the end and then let the two kids that aren't really good kind of go at it in like Oklahoma drill. That's kind of what this game to me is. It's just the two kids that have the most heart but not the most athletic kind of going at it. It's going to be a fun game, but is it going to be great football? Probably not. Is it going to be entertaining? Absolutely.
That's a crazy analogy because all I could think of is one of those uncoordinated fat kids scored 21 points on Oklahoma in the second quarter. So, okay, let's talk about the Sooners and the Tigers. Missouri ranked number 24 in the nation. This line opened with Missouri at 2.5-point favorite. Oklahoma, that is swung. Oklahoma now a 3-point favorite. The over-under is set at 41.5. Caleb, give me your score prediction.
I mean, this is just hard because I feel like we don't know who's going to play quarterback, and that definitely will play a factor. This is my score prediction with me thinking that Payne is going to be the quarterback. Give me 24-10 Sooners.
Wow.
I think that Oklahoma's going to be able to get a couple turnovers, get favorable field position for this Oklahoma offense and then this Missouri team is just not going to be able to really find that identity they've had without Cook.
I definitely think Cook changed the dynamic of this game if he's not going to play. Here's my problem. Oklahoma beat Auburn 27-21 back on September 28th. That followed 3 games of garbage. 34-3 loss to Texas, 35-9 loss to South Carolina, 26-14 loss to Ole Miss. And even, we left the Ole Miss game in Oxford feeling good because we thought there was some sense of direction. You destroy Maine 59-14 last weekend, but I haven't seen the pattern break against SEC teams yet. I need to see it. Until I do that, I don't know that I can pick Oklahoma to win. So I'm going to, with vomit coming out of my stomach, pick Missouri to win 27-24 in a game that I'm desperately wanting you to come back and say to me, you're an idiot on Sunday night when we do this podcast. Is that fair?
That's fair.
So I'm giving you full permission when we start the podcast Sunday night. I'm telling you right now, I'm begging for the opportunity for you to tell me you're an idiot.
Okay. And
Now,
I will do that gladly.
We have less than we just had a couple minutes left. So I just got to throw this out there at the very, very end. My boy DeAndre Hopkins went off on Monday night, and I bested you, Caleb. I beat my terrible fantasy football team has now won 3 in a row, including the first place team in the Western Division of our league, which was you, and I wiped the floor with you.
Yeah, it was kind of a bit ridiculous. I mean, how does an old man play that good?
I had fun texting you and watching that game.
Do
All
you,
right,
do you want to know something? Little fun fact about that game?
What's that?
I looked at it was almost every single player in my roster's lowest point total for the season.
It's because of my defense, man. My fantasy team defense.
Alrighty.
Nothing, whatever. All right. Hey, enjoy your college football this weekend. Caleb, you did a great job as usual. Wall-to-wall football starting Thursday night, right? And we'll be back on Sunday to talk what was Oklahoma and Missouri. Hopefully we're talking about a a Sooner win. And Caleb gets to throw those words out at me as we start the next podcast. Have a great weekend. Be safe. Boomer Sooner.
I'm gonna be the man who's working hard for you. And when the money